I've been getting a lot of requests to talk about what it was like to withdraw from heroin in county jail. As you might be able to hear, I'm a little bit under the weather today, so I thought maybe it was a good day to talk about it. I also want to talk about it because there was a really profound lesson that it taught me that I want to share with you that might be helpful for anyone who's struggling. But real quick, if you're new here, I'm Brian. I was once a trauma ICU RN, and then I became a full-time heroin and meth addict. I was arrested for selling drugs, and I'm currently on house arrest, serving out the rest of my 3 to 10 year sentence. This channel is just a way for me to share what I've learned after having lived an addicted life, and also to share how I'm finding meaning and balance in my life going forward. So welcome. Being sick sucks, but no matter how sick I get, it's only ever a minor annoyance after having gone through serious drug withdrawal so many times. All right, so I actually went through withdrawal in county jail twice. I'm going to tell you the story of each. The first time I was arrested, this is when I was coming back across the border from California to Nevada, and I got pulled over right away. Somebody had told the cops that I was going to be coming back across the border with a bunch of stuff, and they pulled me over and they searched me, and then they found the stuff and they arrested me. I'd never been to county jail ever before, so this was my first experience getting taken in a cop car to jail. I remember being concerned that I was going to jail because I had quite a lot of heroin on me when they found me that time, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I remember my primary concern on the ride to the jail was that I was going to be withdrawing. I remember getting there and they started to process me in. And when they looked over me, they found this huge abscess on my arm. Because I was so strung out and shot out, I had been using needles to shoot up, and my veins were so messed up that I had resorted to doing muscle shots where I would just stick it into my arm and inject there because I couldn't hit a vein a lot of the time. There's actually like a missing part of my muscle. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the video, but I can still feel it. It was actually so bad that they actually took me to the hospital that I used to work at years before. And I went in the ER and they were talking about whether they wanted to drain it or not, but they ended up just prescribing me these really strong antibiotics and then taking me back to jail, finishing the processing, and then they put me in the intake unit, which is basically where you're in this little cell with one other person. And once I got in that cell, I was just mostly concerned with the withdrawal that I knew was coming. I was in the cell with another guy who was also withdrawing. This guy was like getting up all night, projectile vomiting into the toilet. I remember after the first day or so, it's really started to kick in. And if you've never gone through heroin withdrawal, it's like the worst flu that you've ever had times 1,000. It's just achy all over, super restless. It feels like there's somebody tickling you from the inside, but like not the fun kind of tickling, like the uncomfortable kind where you're really like uncomfortable, but like from the inside, and it never stops. Or like bugs crawling under your skin is the way some people describe it. But you're so exhausted that you just want to sleep, but there's no way that you can sit still because you're just writhing around because you're so uncomfortable and restless and achy. And then the worst part is just your head. You're so messed up mentally. There's like this extreme like depression and just insane like imbalance in your head. And so you feel like just absolutely just horrible. So as this started to set in, I was still kind of in denial that I was going to be there for very long. For some reason, I had decided that there's no way that I'm staying here. Somehow I'm going to get out of here. And as I was like so unaccepting of this, that I was actually going to be there for very long, I remember just, what am I going to do? And all I could think of was just like, I would just scream out at the guards, like when they were walking by and stuff. And I'd just be like, hey, you need to do something. I was just out of my mind. And I was just like writhing and screaming and just sweating. That's another thing that happens. You just sweat profusely, and you're just like, I have this little blanket on this plastic mat that I'm in there with, and it's just covered in sweat, and just like, so you're wet and cold because the blanket is cold, and you just can't get warm, but then you're just too hot, and then you can't get warm. It's a mess. And so I remember I was just yelling like, hey, I'm not okay. This is not okay. And eventually they had the nurse see me, and they saw that my blood pressure was so high that I was taken to the infirmary, and they gave me Subutex, which is a medication that kind of helps with the withdrawals. And they prescribed me to have that for just a couple of days. During this time, I was transferred out of intake and up to a unit where it wasn't a cell, it was like this big room with a bunch of bunk beds, and there was like an upper level and a lower level where everybody just had a bunk that they were assigned to, and you kind of had to just stay in your bunk unless it was tier time, which is when you could kind of walk around and go mingle in the little common area. And then there was like a shower room over on the other side and a bathroom. There was like probably about 20 bunks in this entire unit, so it could hold maybe 40 people. And I was put on a bottom bunk on the lower level. So I'm there, still feeling like absolute trash, mostly just kind of in my bed trying to rest but unable to rest, just going day after day without sleep. Subutex was still helping, but then they stopped giving it to me because they only give it for a couple of days, and I was still feeling just like absolute trash. And I'm surrounded by a bunch of other people that are just withdrawing too, and we're just sitting there on the tables in the tier just talking to you like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like, I feel so bad. And we were just walking around. There's like a little cement yard also that's just very small with walls that go so high you can't even see really the sky except for out of this little grate. And we just walk in circles around that little cement yard. So in addition to the heroin withdrawal and the meth withdrawal, I was also withdrawing from meth as well. They were giving me these antibiotics for this abscess that I had. And the antibiotics were making me feel way worse on top of the withdrawal, right? Your body can't handle anything. Like, you feel so uncomfortable, and like something else like that was just overwhelming. So I actually started refusing the antibiotics when I was up there. I just couldn't handle it. I also couldn't eat anything. There was this food that was coming in that was just so disgusting. Like, even from a sober perspective, it's disgusting. So I just was not eating at all. After a couple of days there, I remember I was making phone calls to the people on the outside that I had been using with and running around with. I found out that my bail was, I think it was like $7,000 or something like that. And the bond, though, amount, which is the amount that you can pay to get out, I'm not sure how it works still, but the bond was like $700 that could be paid, and then I, would get out. So I was talking to them. I was like, you have to come up with this money. You have to bail me out. And they were like, we're working on it. We're working on it. Still to this day, I'm astonished that they got it together to do this. It was particularly one friend of mine. I mean, he was strung out too, so I was like, I was like begging him to do this, but he kept being like, yeah, tomorrow, and it still wouldn't happen. And then finally, he was like, I'm doing it right now, and he posted it, and I was like, okay, awesome, they're gonna call me anytime. And I waited the next few hours, and it was just agonizing. And then finally, they called me, and they said, you're being released. And then they released me out to the streets. When I had gotten arrested, I was wearing like shorts and sandals and like this little t-shirt, and it was like freezing outside, and they released me out into the cold at night. And it was just like, on your own, go get out of here. And so I was like freezing and walked over to the 7-Eleven across the street and just waited for them to pick me up. I was there for a total of about 7 days, and that was that. I got back to where I was going, got more drugs, got high again, and relief, and basically just started using again and started going back to exactly what I was doing. Over the next, I think it was like 3 to 4 weeks when I was out and running around again, I think I was really at death's door at this point, because I had never had to be Narcaned before. Narcan is a drug that's given when someone's overdosing to kind of bring them out of it. I'd never had to have that done to me before. But over these next 3 or 4 weeks, it happened 3 times. One time particularly scary, which is a crazy story that I'll tell you about at a different time. But basically, I was like, I think I was just, my body was giving out, and I was kind of on the verge of death. I'd finally done so much that it finally caught up to me, and it was finally like getting to the point where I was about to be done. And I thankfully got rearrested again. And this time, when I was heading back in the police car, I kind of knew this time that I wasn't going to get out again, that this was going to be a little bit more permanent at least. But again, despite having no idea what was ahead of me as far as a sentence went or how long I was going to be there, my primary concern was that I was going to be withdrawing again. That was the overriding concern for sure. So again, I was processed. I was put in the intake unit for a couple of days, and then I was moved up to that same open unit. This time I was up on the top bunk on the top tier. And this is where I stayed for the next, I believe it was like a week or two. Again, withdrawals, terrible, just trying to find some way to get some rest. Days going by where I would just look at the clock 24/7. I would sleep maybe like 10 or 15 minutes at a time. Again, barely eating. It took me a long time before I was like starving enough that I started just eating a couple bites here and there. I remember like round the clock, and especially at night while everybody else was sleeping, I would constantly be getting up and walking down to the showers, and just because nobody would be in there in the middle of the night, and I would wait for the porter to clean the showers. The porter is somebody who's also an inmate that just has the job of like doing a bunch of tasks around the unit. I would wait for them to finish cleaning the showers at like 2 a.m. and then so that nobody would be in there, and I would go down into the shower and I would just take my foam shoe that they gave me and I would like sit on it in the shower cross-legged and just turn the shower on and just sit in there because I would be just so uncomfortable, and that was like the only thing that was giving me any relief. And I would just sit in there for like 45 minutes and just like rock back and forth and keep pushing the button because the shower turns on for like a minute and then it turns off again. Sometimes there would be no hot water and I would just get cold, and I would just like, oh my God, but I would sit in there anyway and just to change some sort of sensation in my body, and then just go back and lay down and try to rest for a minute. This went on for days. I remember at one point, a couple weeks in, I was sitting at a table with a few other people, and we were sitting around and we were talking, and I had gotten up to leave and I had said some kind of a joke or something, and I was joking and I kind of like shoved this chair a little bit that I was getting up from just as part of the joke. I can't remember what I was saying, but it was taken lightly at the table. It was completely a joke. And then one of the guards said to me, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like, because I shoved the chair a little bit or whatever. And I remember I just like snapped at this guy. I was like, "F you, da 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 da." Like, I was just so irritated. And I just freaked out, and I remember telling him like, "Dude, get me out of here. Get me out of this unit then. Put me in max," or whatever. Like, I didn't even know what that meant. But and so then like, it was about 45 minutes later, they called my name and they were like, "Roll your shit up, Collins. Like, you're going to the like a higher security unit or whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, fine." Blah, 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 blah. I was so just angry, and I didn't care. And then that's when they moved me down to like the cells, like where you're just in a cell with one other person. And that's where I stayed for the remainder of my 4 months or so in county jail. By the time I got down there, I was to the point where I was sleeping mostly through the night. And for anyone who's gone through heroin withdrawal before, you know that when you start to be able to sleep for at least mostly get sleep all right, that's when you're moving from the acute withdrawal period into the post-acute withdrawal period, which can last a couple of months. The profound kind of insight that I learned from this, that I referred to at the beginning of this video, occurred during this period. Prior to all this, throughout my life, I had gone through opiate withdrawal countless times. And I had made it through the acute withdrawal period countless times. But it was always in the long post-acute withdrawal period where I would relapse. So even though the acute withdrawal period is much more uncomfortable and much more acutely difficult, the post-acute withdrawal period is the time that would always get me. And I think that maybe a lot of people can relate to this, because that's the part where you're just You just want to feel better now, and you just want to be back to your life, and you want to get back to, living a life without drugs, a good life without drugs. That's the intention, right? But you're stuck in this sort of halfway feeling like shit still, and just the day after day of that just keeps going, kind of gets in your head, and you're just like, this is what life is like. You forget that you're still kind of detoxing, and so you start to trick yourself and think like, wow, this is miserable, this is no way to live, and if this is what life is like without drugs, then I would rather be on drugs. And you kind of start to tell yourself this stuff in the back of your mind, and it just works on you psychologically until finally you kind of just end up having a moment of weakness where you're just like, okay, I just need some relief for a couple hours here. Will just get me through this for the rest of the time. And it's not going to make me start to fully withdraw again. I'm just going to take a little bit, and then that's where you get hooked again, and then you're back to the races. So it turns out that the post-acute withdrawal period is actually the hard part. That's the most challenging part. At least for me, it always was. But in this situation that I was in now, in county jail, the post-acute withdrawal period, while it was still very uncomfortable, like just as physically uncomfortable as it had ever been, it was, in retrospect, I realized, so much easier and more productive mentally than any other time had ever been. What I realized the reason for that is because there was just no option to relapse. There was no option to do drugs. There were drugs floating around in county jail. It wasn't like when I got to prison where drugs were just available super easily. I was aware that there were drugs floating around and there were people overdosing in intake and blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't so available that I really knew how to seek it out at this point. So it just wasn't an option. I was not thinking about, how am I going to get high? That option had dropped away completely. And what that did to the psychology of the withdrawal was it created this just absence of that option left me with only forward progress. This is just the way it is. It was like total acceptance. This is just the way I feel today. And, what can I do to make myself feel better? And so I started, getting on a routine. I started exercising as much as I could, even though it was still really uncomfortable. I would just do a little bit. I was so weak. My body was so shot out, but I just started to do just a little bit of this and that and exercise and just kind of socialize a little bit more and find ways to distract myself when I was really feeling uncomfortable. And I just kind of got through it. And afterwards, I realized that most of the agony in that period is really, and even in the acute withdrawal period, most of the real agony is psychological. It's when you know that I'm going through this, but the option to end it right now is right out there, and I can just go get another bag or whatever, and I can just go get high again. And not having that option at all, like I said, was absolutely liberating in the context of withdrawing from drugs. I think that this can be applied to any kind of addiction, whether it's a substance addiction or an addiction to a behavior or an addiction to another person in a toxic relationship. Whatever it is that you're addicted to, it's like that option, to contact that person, that option to go to the casino and gamble again. It's that option being available to you that is the most tormenting thing. Because people who have behavioral addictions, they go through withdrawal as well. And it's like psychological, obviously, more, because it's not a chemical that's in their body. But that psychological withdrawal is just as powerful. And I realized that even in the face of heroin withdrawal, which next to alcohol and maybe a couple other things is stereotypically the worst kind of physical withdrawal you can go through, even considering that, it's still the psychological part that is really the most crazy making and the most tormenting. So the way that I see this translating to anybody else with any kind of addiction, no matter how mild or serious, the best thing that you can do, you probably won't have the luxury of being locked in a cage, that made it easy for me. But the thing that you can really focus on, that's really the most important thing to focus on, is to remove the option. However you can devise in your circumstance to just remove the option from your mind. Somehow, like whatever it takes for you to do that, whether you need to move locations, you need to get out of the situation that you're in, or you need to just devise some other way to just absolutely get the option out of your mind for a good long period of time, longer than you think, to really flush yourself of this. Because when I was in there, these acute withdrawals go on longer than you think. And in all my times withdrawing in the past, it's like you think you're over the withdrawal, but you're not really yet. And what I got from going through this withdrawal fully for the first time, I realized that I would think I was done withdrawing, right? And I would be going along, then a couple more weeks would go by and I'd be like, oh wow, I feel better than I did before. And I thought I was done before, but I guess I wasn't. And then a couple more weeks would go by and I'd be like, wow, I thought I was done a couple weeks ago, but I guess I wasn't, because now I'm feeling even better. And so that's the period that gets you when you're addicted. You know, you think you're better and you think this is just it now, but you're still not through it. You're still not through it. So you need to figure out a way to absolutely remove that option from your mind in order to get through a much longer period than you think you need to get through, to really detach and really then be able to evaluate, okay, what does this mean to me? And that's when you can really start doing the work of getting your life together, because you're getting your life together after addiction isn't about the addiction. It's about just your life. And you're like, what? Then you can start to figure out, why did I get into this addiction in the first place? What was wrong that got me in the first place? And then you can start working on that, the problem that existed that got you into it in the first place. Because that's really where the work needs to be done if you want lasting wellness and lasting freedom in your life. You just can't start that work until you really get out of it. I still am applying this lesson to myself today with other things. For example, I often, if eating a healthy diet is really important to me, and I get on this healthy diet thing, and then I'll get off of it and I'll start to eat other stuff. This happens to me all the time, and I always have to recommit to a period of time where I cut everything else out just so that I can reset psychologically. And I've done this by developing this practice of like making promises to myself and then keeping them. And so it's not something that's easy to do at first, but I've developed this thing where I can go, okay, Brian, I'm making you a promise today that for 30 days you're not going to eat anything but your diet again, because you've kind of gotten off track and you need to get back on track. And then I make that promise, and that removes the option from my head. It's not that simple maybe when you're really early on with a serious drug addiction, but for me, I've developed that now where I can just make the promise, and that alone is enough to remove the option completely, and I never have to struggle with it. So like I'm on that right now for the next like 27 days or 26 days or whatever. I've been on it for a couple days now. I have removed that option, and all of the mental struggling with what I'm like being at work and having all these snacks and garbage around and just being like constantly coming in the room and being like, I'm going to eat one of those Oreos. I think I'm not going to do it right now. I'm not going to do it right now. And then no way I'm going to eat that Oreo. And then I come back in 20 minutes later and I'm like, and I find myself eating it, right? That struggle is completely removed just by making this promise to myself. So that's a skill that you can develop. And the first shot at that is going to be something that you have to do to make that choice for yourself when you're trying to get away from something that's really problematic in your life. You just have to eliminate that option somehow, however it takes at first. If you can't trust yourself, you have to use other people, use whatever resources you have to eliminate the option so you can just go through the process without the psychological torment of it. That's really the worst part, is just your psychology. That's what's working against you the most when you're attached to these things. All right, I think I did a little rambling there at the end. I don't know how long this video is going to go on for, but I just think that this is such an important, crucial point. I've been getting questions and emails from people who are struggling with things like attachment to a toxic partner or a toxic affair that they're having or something, or somebody who's trying to get off of a drug and they're able to take these breaks of a few weeks, but they can't understand why they keep getting back on afterwards. And I think that this is a key point here for how you can work with that. Okay, so the song of the week, for those of you who don't know, is just the song that I've been into the most this week. And this week, I'm gonna have to do it again with Fiskum. I did a song from her a couple weeks ago, but then I just discovered this one as well, and wow, it is the best one so far. It's called Find Myself, live at Studio X. It's a YouTube video that you're gonna have to click in the description for. I absolutely am blown away by her. She's got such an incredible voice and so powerful and so sensitive at the same time. And this performance is like impeccable. The song is so hauntingly beautiful. I'm blown away by it. I'm so into her. I'm completely sold on her. If you watch the other video, you know that my buddy Nate is in the band. He plays bass for them. And the other day, before I even saw this video, he did a video call with me, and I got to meet her on the video call, and it was so cool. I was so starstruck. And then shortly after that, he sends me this video, and it just totally floored me. And I'm totally 100% Fiskum fanboy now. So check it out. It's great. Give her some love in the comments. Give her a subscribe and a like. It's funny, I just realized that I never encourage ever in any of my videos anybody to subscribe and like on these videos on this channel, but I always say it for the people that I'm plugging. But I guess that's just how I feel. Like I don't like asking for that kind of stuff. If you guys want to subscribe and like, you already know that is the thing. And then I feel so compelled to encourage you to subscribe and like to other people. That's just how I feel, I guess. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. All right. Thank you for watching. You guys are the best. I just love the audience, and I love the returning audience. And I'm going to be doing a live stream pretty soon. I'll schedule it. I've never done a live stream before. I don't know what it's like or what to do. I think I'm just going to throw it on and see what happens without any plans, just to kind of test it out. So look for a live stream, I guess, scheduled thing. I don't know how it works, how the post works. I'll figure it out, and it'll be coming up probably in the next week here, hopefully. And we'll just hang out and see what happens. So anybody who wants to do that. All right, take care of yourselves, okay? Take care of yourselves this week. It's fun, I promise. Okay, bye.